Hey Ray, how are you?
Oh, I'm bloody good, Nico. Good to see you again.
Welcome back. It's been a while.
Has been a while, too long between podcasts. We've got a very special guest today, Nico.
We do.
Going to be an interesting one too. I reckon he's got a couple of interesting stories up his sleeve.
I've heard a whisper.
A whisper that we might have someone that's Mr. Broken Hill.
Will that be right, Mr. Andrew Schmidt?
Welcome to the show, Andrew Schmidt. Good friend of ours, and we're excited to have you with us for a chat.
Yeah, look, good morning, lads, and I must say, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. What's happened? You've had 30 names on a list, you've gone down, unavailable.
No, we want to see if we can grow our reach into Broken Hill, and thought that you'd be the man, Andrew.
I remember Wayne Carey visited here last year, and he went back on a podcast and had rave reviews about the place, so I'll probably have to take a leaf out of his book.
Andrew, let's just kick straight into it. So you didn't grow up in Broken Hill, did you? Where'd you grow up?
No. Well, I was born in Broken Hill, and then Mum and Dad had a guts full of me by the time I turned 11, so they packed me off to boarding school in Adelaide for 6 years. And that was between the ages of about 11 and 17, and then I sort of bounced back, and then I went back to Adelaide for a little while, then bounced back. So born here, but most of my misspent youth was in Adelaide, boarding school, getting belted by the monks.
So what was it like going from Broken Hill to the big smoke of Adelaide?
Yeah, it was, at that age, I was probably lucky in one way that there was a number of people I knew from Broken Hill that were attending the same school. It was Sacred Heart College in Summerton Park. But to get dropped off at the age of 11, and this is late January, and, Mum and Dad say, well, we'll see you at Easter. Yeah, and look, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't homesick. I was, and I think everybody goes through that. But, once you get over that initial hurdle, that probably took a few months, and the older you got and the more mature, I suppose I could use that term, life became a lot better, a lot more freedom as we got a bit older at boarding school. Mm.
What led you back to Broken Hill, Andrew?
Well, pretty much, shall I say, I wasn't an A-grade student. There were a few times we sort of got out. It was run by the Morris brothers, and look, I'll say they were very good to us. But, we sort of walked across the white line, and a couple of my mates got suspended in year 12, and I was probably lucky I didn't. So I wasn't ever someone who got straight A's. I managed to get my way through. And, sometimes you get to the end of that school era and you've got no idea what you want to do. Well, I was in that boat. I had no idea, and, I had mates who wanted to go to uni or go back on the farm or be a tradie or whatever, but I didn't have a clue. So I came home, and the local newspaper, the Barrie Daily Truth, which is owned by the unions, were advertising for cadet journalists. So I applied, and I thought I was across the line, but I was told at the 11th hour I was number 2 choice because I'd been educated in Adelaide, and a union-owned newspaper wanted a local person to get the job.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Yeah, fair income, yeah. I went through the whole interview process, and the editor at the time and the general manager, and indications were that, I was going to get this position as a cadet journalist, and I had to go before the Barrie Industrial Council, who are the overarching body of all the unions in Broken Hill, and then they said, no, we're going to go with this other person. And then I found out several months down the track that, I'd been educated in Adelaide, and they wanted someone who'd been educated here in Broken Hill, even though I was a Broken Hill local.
So then what happens?
Well, I sort of, and my mum and dad were the sort of people, well, you're not going to sit on your ass. A gap year was unheard of. You didn't have gap years. And I had a relation who was in the employment office at the Zinc Corporation, one of the mines here. And Dad said, well, you can go up there till you get your head sorted and work out what you want to do. And I started there when I was 17, working on the surface. And it was pretty cruisy, Monday to Friday, 8-hour shifts, off-sighting to tradesmen. Wasn't too bad a gig for a 17, 18-year-old. And I had a few mates working underground, and I turned 19, and they said, why don't you work underground? It's 7-hour shifts and a lot more money, double your pay. So at 19, I went underground to earn more money.
How was that?
Oh, well, that's a culture shock to say the least. But we're talking here, when I did that, they actually put you through what they called a mining school for about a month, which acclimatised you to being underground. And you went with experienced miners, and they sort of showed you the ropes. And you wouldn't believe it, I ended up all up spending over 10 and a half years in the mine while, as Dad said, I was trying to sort myself out. But the thing that kept me there, and you two would understand this, was the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you cop any injuries working in the mine?
Oh, a few stitches on the hand above the eye, but I probably one of the more infamous injuries working underground. I was climbing up a ladder, and the dungarees we used to wear, the buttons used to come off at the front, and I felt this bit of a tug down below. When I had a look, my waist down was just covered in blood. And you ready for this, boys? I hope you're both sitting down. A nail had ripped the foreskin on the old fellow back about 5 inches.
Jesus.
Jeez, we're launching the story where you should have stayed in bed, because I don't know how you're going to top that when we ask that question later in the program. Is it an absolute true story, Andrew?
True story. So the fellow I was working with, we went out to the plat where the cage came down, and in those days, probably still, if you rang 12 bells, that alerted everybody that there'd been an accident. And I said to him, I wasn't in any pain. I said, look, don't worry about ringing the 12 bells. Just get on the phone and ring the bloke on the cage that's on the surface. No. He rang the 12 bells. Down came the cage. The boys come charging out the stretcher and gas masks on, because they had no idea what it was. And I'm sitting there. And they said, well, what's the accident? What's he done? And when I showed them, they just about collapsed. So I put the cage up, and they called them the ambulance officer who'd done about a week's training. He took one look and sent me off to hospital. And two painful things then happened. One was a local injection, and two was the stitches. And that story went around Broken Hill quicker than the plague.
I bet that would be a bit of a legendary story of Broken Hill, yeah?
Well, it was at the time, and I remember, when I was off work for about a month because of, they worried about infection, and the story was that the doctor had a look and said to the nurse he's going to need 5 stitches and said clean the wound, and after she cleaned the wound, she went out and came back and said to the doctor, he's going to need more than 5.
Oh, really?
I still bear the scar to today.
So fair to say that your mining career didn't probably last that long after that?
No, look, what I will say, I worked with a lot of great people. It was a wonderful grounding. Everybody was treated equally. It was good money. And even today, and look, I finished on the mines now, I'm just trying to think, probably close to 30 years ago. And even now I run into a lot of the blokes I work with. A lot of the older fellas have obviously passed on, and always sit down and have a bit of a chat and a laugh and a joke and a coffee. And a lot of great memories. It was a great grounding for someone of my age at the time. Great money, which enabled me to do a few things which I normally wouldn't have been able to do. But the next stage, I was sitting home on a Saturday morning, and I remember Dad sitting there, and he said to me, so have you sorted yourself out yet after 11 years since you left school? And I was reading the Adelaide Advertiser, and there was an ad in there for a travel agent's course in Adelaide. So I went down and had to do an exam, basic exam to get in to show that you weren't completely stupid. And then of the 60 that sat the exam, they invited 40 back for a one-on-one interview, and they were taking 20. So I'm sitting in this room, and I'm a miner from Broken Hill, and there's teachers, uni students, all these people with great credentials. I said to the girl interviewing me, I said, look, all these people you're interviewing, I'm probably at the end of the line, but one thing I'll tell you, that if I ever got a job like this, I certainly would bring something different. Yeah.
Which led to being a tour guide?
Yeah, I sort of had a couple of opportunities in Adelaide, and the bloke that there was 2 travel agents in Broken Hill, and the bloke that owned one of them knew him fairly well, family, and he contacted me to say, look, I'm looking for a travel agent. He had an agency in Broken Hill. He had probably about 8 or 9 staff. Never employed a male travel agent before. It's always been women. And I went and sat down and had a coffee with him, and I came back to Broken Hill and started with him. He was also the agent for Ansett Airlines, Kendall Airlines, used to fly to Adelaide, and Hazelden Airlines to Sydney, and ended up working for him for 10 years. It was a great period. So I'm talking here sort of my late 20s to late 30s, an opportunity that enabled me to, basically travel the world and meet some wonderful people. So that was the next chapter. You reckon I could write a book on mining? I could write a book on travel.
Well, tell us a couple of stories about when you're travelling, some of the places you went for starters, but you got any decent stories from when you travelled overseas?
the Calgary Stampede was and still is one of the great events, in Canada. It's like a monstrous rodeo gymkhana combined with the Sydney show. It's absolutely huge. So we took a group of about 30 people over. No, we flew to Hawaii, hour or two on the ground, then on to Vancouver, arrived in the middle of the day, did a tour, and I took them all to a sports bar next door to where we were staying, and I said, look, let's have dinner and a few beers. I was in bed by 10 because, we've all been on the road. 3 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call from the captain of the Vancouver Police Department, one of the tour groups in jail, because he assaulted a bloke in a wheelchair at the sports bar. They were arguing between what was a better sport, Aussie rules or American ice hockey. And this fellow in our tour group was about 60, so he let a couple fly. But the bloke in the wheelchair started it. So 3 o'clock in the morning, this fella says to me, you got a choice, you can come and get him out, or we'll hose him out at 7 o'clock. And I said, we'll hose him out at 7 o'clock. So he came in next morning, we were having breakfast, and he looked like somebody had spent the night in jail. Then I had another incident that really stood out. We're in Rome, went to the Vatican. I don't know if you boys have been, but the blokes are standing around with the spears and all that, looking pretty official. Next thing, there's this huge ruckus. They're running everywhere. People are screaming. I've gone in. And one of our tour group, who used to get up in the morning and have a couple of whiskies for breakfast, so it's like 35, 40 degrees, he's decided to climb the altar to get a closer look at what's going on. He's been arrested. They've carried him out, one on each arm, one on each leg, and of course I land with it because I'm the tour guide. So I had to convince him he's an alcoholic and that we're going to leave the country within 2 days. Oh, look, some of the things, there was one occasion, one of our manager actually took a tour group to Europe, and they were in Paris. So I'm sitting here in Broken Hill in the agency, and I get a phone call from one of the tour group members. They'd all gone out the night before, and this bloke had met a, shall we say, lady of the night, and ventured off with her. He woke up the next morning, and that day they were getting the bus to Calais to go back to England, but he couldn't remember where he was staying, so he's rang us in Broken Hill. I've had to ring the hotel or the motel in Paris. They've had to hold the bus up for 20 minutes. So you can imagine there's 40 people on a bus. Half of them are from Broken Hill in this local region. Next thing, this car pulls up. This fellow gets out. I think it was pretty obvious that the lady of the night got out with him. Proceeded to give him a great big tonguey on the footpath in front of the bus. And my manager's grabbed the microphone and said, I'll say this bloke's name was Frank. Frank's met a cousin of his in Paris and stayed the night.
That's good.
We've had people in jail. We've had people... Probably the one that nearly caused a riot. We had a tour of the Guinness factory. And at the end of it, you go up to this beautiful old bar, and there's about 4 or 5 barmen, and they pour every member of your touring group going through a Guinness. And this bloke asked the barman, would he put lemonade in his Guinness? Well, you ever seen those scenes in the old Western movies where the whole saloon goes quiet? I thought they were going to hang him by the nuts. So we had to apologise. I had to tell them he was only joking. But look, there's 100 stories.
It would have been a really good... How many years did you say you did that for?
I did that for 10 years. So that was late 20s to late 30s. And probably had 30, 35 overseas trips. Probably took away at least a dozen tour groups. But that was like, Africa and all through the States, Canada, Europe. It was just a wonderful opportunity, particularly taking people away. Because a lot of people who go on those sort of tours are people who wouldn't travel by themselves or had never been overseas before. They could have been in their 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
We had a ball, absolute ball.
So is there anywhere overseas that you went that you would never go back?
Not really, no, I don't think so. There's places I'd definitely go back again tomorrow. I loved when we got off the beaten track in the Highlands of Scotland and through Ireland and those little small villages where you walk into the pub and every night's party night, and the whole town's there. Love that. Canada, Calgary Stampede was amazing. No, there's nowhere really. I mean, probably some of those big American cities, there's not much there really, is there? They're just, concrete blocks. But once you get out into the country areas, and I even say to people now, it's the way to go. But no, there's nowhere really. I mean, South Africa was a bit daunting. I was there. We took some people over there not long after Mandela had been released. And, there's parts of that you just got to be careful where you go, and there's parts of that where you wouldn't go at night. Johannesburg's probably not the safest place I've ever been. Yeah,
Joburg's pretty bad.
Joburg's pretty bad. Yeah. But we survived.
Fast forward now towards the end of your travel time. What was next after that? Was that when you went to the ABC, or how does that work from there?
No, well, my last couple of years in travel, I met a fellow who came up from Adelaide. His name was Riley Phelan, and he was the Hill FM breakfast announcer at the FM radio station in Broken Hill. We became mates. So the radio station is actually built like an old radio, and Riley's sister at the time was working in the marketing department of the AFL in Melbourne, and his dad was the photographer for the Herald Sun for all his sporting events. We became mates, and he said to me, we should have a footy show on the AM commercial station Saturday morning. So we started doing that, and I said, we need someone to come on. So this is the late 90s. I said, we need someone to come on who can give us a bit of an overview of what's happening in Melbourne. And his sister was going out with a bloke called Andy Marr.
All right.
who was writing then for Inside Footy. So we started putting Andy Marr on, and his nickname was Bucket because he used to drink beer by the bucket. And to be fair to say, Andy's kicked on a little bit since those days.
He's done all right.
He's done all right. Came up to Broken Hill a few times with Riley's sister, and we all went out and we caught up in Melbourne. But as I said, this is like the late 90s. Anyway, the bloke that owned the commercial radio station, which was AM and FM, offered me a job hosting a drive program which they wanted to put together and being the sales manager. And I've been in travel for 10 years. I made the call, so I went over to the commercial radio station. The bloke that owned it bailed out after 12 months and sold it, so I ended up becoming the manager. And I was there for 3 years. And at the same time, Riley and I were hosting a segment every Friday night on Southern Cross Television that was local sports. So we'd go out during the week, we'd film 3 stories, we'd sit at his place on a Thursday night drinking a slab, we'd edit it, and then we'd present it on a Friday night. So we did that for 3 years. And then the next stage of that was when I got a call from the ABC, which came about in a very strange way, boys.
How did that happen, Andrew?
Yes, tell us.
Well, the state manager, her and her husband owned a shack at Wallaroo in South Australia on the beach there. And I was sitting there having a few beers one night, and a mate of mine I used to go to school with was sitting having a beer with him. And the manager said to this friend of mine, I've got to go up to Broken Hill. The bloke managing the ABC's resigned. We've got to start doing some interviews to see who can take his place. So my mate says, well, Schmidt's at the ABC, at the commercial station. Why don't you have a chat to him? So we had a coffee, had lunch. I applied, and I landed the job here in, I've got to think about this now, 2003.
Far out. So you've been doing it for 21 years.
21 years this year. It's changed a hell of a lot. In those days, it was just radio. Then along came a website. Then came social. Then now we do TV. The staff numbers here have grown as well since I first started. So it'll be 21 years, I think, July this year.
You still enjoy it as much as you did when you first started, Andrew?
Yeah. And look, there's no great secret to radio is you got to be local. Whether you're in, Mildura, Swan Hill, Broken Hill, Karratha, Albany, you've just got to report on local issues, local stories. I mean, the national and international ones get covered very extensively, but you've got to be local. And if that's the local agricultural fair, or the local footy final, or there's a film festival on, or the Scouts are doing something, or somebody's just celebrated 50 years running a coffee shop, well, that's what people want to hear. So you've got to be local. You always try and find a local story that can go on a national audience. Yeah. But stay local. I mean, I've been hosting the breakfast show, so the alarm goes off at 4:30 each morning. Roll into work, start here, 6:15, and away you go.
How do you go getting up early, Andrew? Is it?
No. Look, it's no doubt in the summertime you just bounce out of bed. It's not a problem. But when your alarm goes off and it's June, July, and it's 1 degree, you sort of give yourself an extra couple of minutes. But I always find hot shower, get into work, coffee. You sort of go through your news feeds, the ABC news feed, and I look at some of the commercial ones as well. You normally got your program fairly well prepared. And once you go on there, you've got to be up. You can't come on there 6:15 in the morning going, had a big night. Been on the turf, been on the cans. You just got to be up and you just got to let people know what they want. If it's good enough, it's good enough. But no, I love it. And I'd rather do a breakfast program than, say, an afternoon or drive. Not that we have them in the country. Yeah. But breakfast, people are waking up in the morning, so what you're telling them, 9 times out of 10 is the first time they've heard it for the day. And I think with the demise of, we had Southern Cross local news bulletins here 5 nights a week. Well, that's gone. Our local paper's gone from 6 editions a week to 2. You then got that responsibility to let people know what's going on.
You've got to keep them informed.
Keep them informed, but I must admit, there has been a few times where I've sort of gone home 3 o'clock and, you sort of toss up, is it worth going to bed?
I bet. Yeah. So what gets you up in the morning?
It's called an alarm clock. I never wake up in the morning thinking I don't want to do this anymore. I just love it.
Yep.
I really do enjoy it. Every day is different. Every day you come in, there's something new, something's happened, someone to talk to. And it's just, and I always find too, that interesting, like I interviewed a bloke just recently, he's on an outback property, who just notched up 60 years having a pilot's license, which he uses on his property. He told a few of his stories. A local bloke who's just spent 50 years selling cars, he's in his mid-70s. I love those sort of stories, and it's interesting when you get out in the morning, you go to get a coffee or whatever you're doing, and people stop you and say, I heard that interview this morning, or I didn't know about that. That's what local radio is all about. They bring in all these so-called consultants and experts. It's quite easy. I'd walk in the room and I'd say, keep it local. That's all you got to do. Keep it local, interesting, informative, entertaining. That's it. It's a simple recipe.
And I think while we're talking about local, your passion for Broken Hill shines through. And tell us a bit about some of the Broken Hill isms, some of the things that only happen in Broken Hill.
Well, there's probably things we can talk about and things we can't talk about.
Well, let's start with cheese law.
That always comes up, that one, and it's something that we grew up with. We just take it for granted. I mean, it's no great secret. You get a bit of cheese, you mix it with a bit of the old coleslaw, and bang, you got cheese law. And it's funny, you walk into the cafe from here, which is a pretty good cafe. You walk in there, and every day they're selling cheese law wraps. So they sell cheese law in a container. Chicken shop sells it in containers. If you buy your chook, you can put cheese law on it. You can get a cheese law toasty. So a bit of carrot, bit of cheese, maybe a little bit of coleslaw if you want it. And people throw onion in and other sorts of stuff. But basically, carrot, cheese, throw it together.
If it didn't sound bad enough, you've got to put it in a toasty. Why ruin a toasty? Is that actually a thing?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, we do them here at work. It's not hard. Whack it in, you got yourself a toasty. Beautiful.
I reckon you should go home and try that, Ray.
Yeah, not a chance.
Ray's very fussy about what he puts in his mouth.
Not what I hear.
So, hey, tell us a little bit about now. It's a bit of a thing in Broken Hill where if you can't get a park out the front of the shop, then what happens?
No. Look, and when I was in the travel game, we were in the main street. People would come in and say to me, I was going to come in and see you yesterday about this holiday, but I couldn't get a park out the front. That's true. Like, the funny thing is they'll go to Adelaide and park and walk 10 city blocks, but they used to drive around. If they couldn't get a park, they wouldn't park around the corner or 2 blocks away, and they'd say, we'll go back tomorrow. I did it today. I went down to get a newspaper. I'm one of those old farts that still reads newspapers. And out the front of the newsagent, there were cars everywhere. So I thought, instead of parking around the corner, I went and filled the car up, came back, and there was a park, so I parked out the front. That's true. But Peter Gers used to host a night program, ABC Adelaide, and he had a famous saying that nobody in Broken Hill walks.
And being so rural, it's pretty common to see, and we've got a few overseas listeners too, by the way, Schmidt. So let's talk about the emus and the kangaroos and where you find them in Broken Hill. Oh,
everywhere. And it's particularly when the drought was on. I remember we had went out here to watch our game of rugby league between a local side. I think they might have been playing the boys from Wilcannia. And as the game's about to start, about 10 emus just wandered onto the oval, so they'd hunt them off to play. Even now, we've had some pretty reasonable rainfall this year, but you'll drive around parts of Broken Hill and you'll see 10 or 12 emus just walking down the street. Everybody just lets them go. When the drought was on, a lot of kangaroos used to come in, particularly at dusk or in early evening. You'd find them munching on your front lawn or back lawn because they're looking for something to eat. I can imagine people from overseas think that's a bit weird, but people here just take it for granted. And the other one was the amount of cockies. Birds, cockatoos.
Yes.
It's just insane. Yeah. And there's a park not far from my place. And I can sit in my lounge room that night with the TV on and you can hear them in that park and just stripping the bark off those trees trying to get a feed, particularly when, again, the drought's on. There's nothing to eat out in the bush. So they all come into town. And the cockies are a pain in the bum. But as far as the kangaroos and the emus are concerned, it just is what it is. No one's really too concerned about it at all.
It's just part of life in Broken Hill, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I tell you the other thing that people here have got used to over the years is that so many movies, miniseries and TV ads have been shot here that you'd walk down the street and you'd see somebody, no one takes any notice. They shot Mad Max here last year, 2023. Chris Hemsworth was in town for probably 2 months. There's a coffee shop not far from me, and I used to go over about 8 o'clock, or 8:15 in the morning to grab a coffee. And he'd be in there each morning inside just having brekkie. So I'm standing outside this little coffee window, and there's about 20 women standing outside this coffee shop. And I did not know any of them, which, you knew straight away. We've got a favourite saying in Broken Hill, they must be from away. If you're not here, you're from away.
Yep.
And you could tell straight away they weren't locals. So I'm standing there. Chris Hemsworth comes out, and they're all giggling and carrying on. And so he's signing autographs and having his photos taken and chatting to them. He was very pleasant. 2 days later, a friend of mine from London sends me a message, and he said, you're on the front page over here of one of the local papers in London. I said, what? This girl had taken a photo of Chris Hemsworth, and in the background you can see this little bald head in the coffee window getting a coffee. And he said, as soon as I saw the photo, I saw that bald head, I knew it was you.
Tell us some other stories about some of the movies that have been done there, Andrew.
Well, recent times, Last Cab to Darwin was shot here.
Oh, good
And
movie.
Last Cab, the 2 Royal Flying Doctor series, mini-series was shot here. Stranger Lambs and Nicole Kidman was shot here. Mission Impossible 2, great story. Mission Impossible 2, they shot some scenes here and Tom Cruise was in town. There's a lady here called Bobby Pickup who ran a talent agency. And Bobby's job was to find extras and scenes and places to shoot scenes, I should say. So they're on this little outback property about half an hour out of Broken Hill, and they've been shooting all morning, and they stopped for lunch. So the lunch was about half a K away. Beautiful day, so Bobby's walking back, and this ute pulls up alongside her. Tom Cruise leans out the window and says, oh, Bobby, do you want a lift? And she said, no, thanks, Tom, I'll walk. Now, I said to her, how many women would have knocked him back?
Oh, that's
Even for
gold.
just a ride in the back of the ute. She said, no, thanks, Tom, I'll walk.
And how did Tom take that?
Well, a knockback from Bobby. Then off he went. But he was here. I'll tell you who was here just early last year. Bill Nighy, the acclaimed English actor.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Love Bill.
He had that great character in Love Actually, the aging old pop rock star.
Yep.
He was here about 3 months. He would just sit down, have coffee, have breakfast, walk the streets, talk to everybody. And after a while, no one really took much notice. But, here's this famous actor. Bill Hunter was here a lot. He was in Priscilla. Mel Gibson did Mad Max 2 here. And, it's just on and on. And where we are at the ABC, there's a motel behind us. And do you remember Don Johnson, the American actor?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
They shot a movie, and he was in there. James Belushi, Hailey Berry. Hailey Berry calls a bit of a stir boy when she was at the pool, let me tell you.
I bet you did.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden, they had record attendances at the local pool. And look, it just goes on and on and on. And they're coming back this year to film the Royal Flying Doctor Series 3. There's a film festival here just recently. Steve Bastoni, the Australian actor, runs that, and he hasn't been in town. And, you see these faces, and you go, oh, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. And you just, not being blasé, but you do tend to get a bit used to it.
Did I hear something about Claude Van Damme? Got some friends there too and was going to do something there?
He's part of this group about saving the white rhinos. Some people I know, friends of mine, have got a property just outside of Broken Hill, and they were quite keen to set it up as like a small national park for the white rhino. So he came out here and spent 4 or 5 days with them. That was probably 4 or 5 years ago now. Nothing's really eventuated, but they reached out to him and he flew out to have a look. And I think there's a couple of places in Australia now that may be looking after the white rhino. Might be Monarto in South Australia, might be one. As I said, people just get used to it. It's just, George Miller here filming that Mad Max, was it 3 or 4? I lose count now. I think it was 4. And people just take it for granted. It's no big deal.
They didn't do Mad Max in Broken Hill because it was too green back in the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, we'd had a lot of rain, and the place was as green as could be. And they got let me just say, the film company got a very good offer from a country in Africa called Namibia to go and film it there, and that's where they went. They'd bought all the cars out here, they'd hired sheds and everything like that, and they'd sorted the accommodation. They were on the cusp of filming Mad Max 4, but we had all that rain. And when you get a lot of rain out here, it does turn a bit green, and when you're filming that sort of show, you don't want greenery.
No.
Let me tell you, boys, you don't want greenery.
Hey, Andrew, you're also known for what you give back to the town, and you do a bit with AFL Broken Hill. Tell us about that, and also about St. Pat's.
My football career was rather short-lived, lads.
What happened there, Andrew?
I remember coming back from boarding school, so I was 17, going on 18, and the North Footy Club, man, my dad had played there and all his brothers. So I went out and did the full pre-season. In those days, you'd road run and you'd wear garbage bags and you had to carry weights and you weren't allowed to drink water. So I did the full pre-season and we played an internal game. So after the internal game, we've all gone back to the local pub and there's probably 60 or 70 fellas in there. And I'm standing there with a group of lads my age, 18, 17, 18, 19. And a couple of senior players come over and they're chatting away to a few in our group who could play. And one of the senior players turned to me and he said, Schmidt, he said, you played in the back pocket? I went, yeah. He said, I'll give you some advice. I said, what's that? He said, I think your future in this club lies in administration. And he was right.
And you've done that, yeah?
Yeah, so look, I got involved in the club, and this is the North Club, and all my mates were playing. I think if you move or you go to any sort of country region and you get involved with a footy, netball, soccer, tennis, cricket, doesn't matter whether you can play the sport or not, but geez, you meet some great people and you make a lot of contacts. And I got involved from a very young age and stayed with the club for over 20 years. I went to Adelaide at one stage. When I got to Adelaide, because I went to Sacred Heart, I ended up managing the Sacred Heart Old Collegians senior team the year I was down there. And then I came back here and got involved with the footy club again. And then towards the end of the 90s, a mate of mine took on the job as chairman of the footy league. So he said to me, do you want to come on board and give me a hand? Which I did do. I think it was the first or second meeting. He said, right, you're vice president. So I've been with the footy league now for over 20 years. Love the involvement. Love the people you work with, so many volunteers. I mean, the clubs are passionate. They're all paying for sheep stations. There's only 4 clubs in Broken Hill, but it's all very parochial. But 99% of people you meet through footy are just wonderful people, characters, whether they're running water, running the club or playing the game or umpiring. So I just love it. We've got a great group of people on our board and our volunteers, and it's just a great social outlet as well, plus you're doing something.
You've had a bit of good support around you, haven't you?
Oh, look, I think it's there are many people, and I often say sometimes in life you're better off to get people helping you in kind than with dollars. But the Football League in Broken Hill, Jubilee Oval, the main oval, is Crown land. So the local football board are the trustees. We're responsible for maintaining it. And I'll give you an example. Our tractor broke down. It was no good. We got a quote for a new one. It was over 40 grand. So I said to a local business bloke, and I'll name him, Steve Radford. I said, Steve, we'll do a deal. And he said, what's the deal? I said, you buy the tractor and then we'll sign an agreement to pay you back over 3 years. That was 18 months ago. And every time I see him, I'd say, I need that contract. He said, yeah, I'll get around to it.
How good.
Steve's dad, Gary Radford, who was an icon of this community, Gary passed away on Anzac Day 2020. Not long after Gary passed away, Steve rang up and said, I want you to come out to my place. I've got something in the shed. Now, his shed is probably the size of a football oval. And in there was, those carts they use in the AFL to go out and bring injured players off the ground?
Yep.
So Gary rang me years before, and he said, have you got one of those carts these blokes have got at the MCG? And I said, no. He said, do you want one? I said, no. Anyway, Steve took me out there. Gary, in his final week or two of his life, said to Steve, I want you to get Schmitty one of those carts for the footy league. 25 grand he spent. Put mag wheels on it. He's got mag wheels on it. It's got the area for the stretcher. And Gary's nickname is Ripper, so we call that cart Little Ripper. And they just donated it. And look, another great story, Gary is very passionate about the St. Pat's Race Club, which I'm involved with, my dad was. And we're at a Chinese restaurant. This is about 2006, in the middle of winter, and we're chatting about St. Pat's and all that, and Gary's there with his lovely wife, Kay. And Gary said, how much does it cost you to hire all those marquees? I said, it was about 20 grand. He said, that's bullshit. He said, I'll build you a shed. And I said, well, we're going to need something in writing. And Gary said, no. He said, verbal's as good as written. And I said, well, what if you go walk out the door and get hit by a truck? So anyway, he went to the toilet and he came back from the toilet. And he'd written on a piece of toilet paper, I, Ripper, will have this shed built for St. Pat's. And I think he kicked in 100 grand. Now, that shed that he built at the race course, I went to a function there a couple of years ago, Dancing with the Stars. It seats 1,000 people. 1,000 people. When I say shed, it's more of a pavilion, polished floors, there's an indoor bar and kitchen, toilets, air conditioned. It's at the racecourse. It seats 1,000 people. This gives you an idea how big it is. Everything gets held there, not only for St. Pat's, but there's been debutante balls, there's been weddings, engagements, funerals, you name it. It's held in the Gary Radford Pavilion, and he built that so we didn't have to hire marquees for the races.
That's awesome.
Incredible story, and money came in from council and a bit from the state government, but, if you're a bit short, Gary'd throw in another 50 or another 100, and it's his foresight and generosity that pavilion is sitting there today. And a lot of people don't know these stories.
They were miners, is that right?
Gary's father was killed in New Guinea in the final weeks and months of the Second World War.
Yep.
So he got involved in the earth-moving business with his family, which was basically had a couple of trucks and a few graders and a water tanker, and he built that up. When they closed the South Mine here, he reopened it and mined it. He formed his own airline, Radford Airlines.
Oh, right.
He got involved in every aspect of earth moving, and then in latter years, Steve took over the business and built it up to over 500 employees. Steve also got his licence. He owns a gold mine. When Gary was crook, he couldn't get the full MRI in Broken Hill. You could only get up to a certain stage, and you had to go to, I think it was Adelaide. So Steve wasn't happy about that. So Steve built a medical centre and forked out for a full MRI machine for Broken Hill.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
So that medical centre now, I think he owns a percentage of it, and he sold a bit off to some of the people who manage it. And it doesn't stop there. I could sit here for an hour and talk about them. And a lot of these things I'm telling you, most of the community wouldn't even know about.
Really?
Yeah. We're sitting here one morning on air, and the scouts rang up. They'd saved up all these cans and bottles to raise a few bob to take the kids to Sydney for a jamboree or whatever. Anyway, the shed got broken into and everything got knocked off. So before I finished on air, Gary came in. He showed me Steve's little Scouts uniform from 40 years ago. He rang Steve. By the end of the day, they'd trucked a container down to the Scout Hall, got the crane, lifted it into the backyard, and that container's still sitting there today. He donated it.
That is unbelievable.
And these are the sort of things that, again, I've dealt with these people a lot and they're friends. And as Gary sadly passed away in 2020, but this is what they do. And getting ready for our race meeting, it's a dirt track. And Racing New South Wales are very fastidious now about how they want that track presented for the safety of the horses and the jockeys and everyone else, which is we 100% support. I ring Steve up. He says, how much sand do you need? I said, 500 tonne. He said, the truck will be out at 4 o'clock. Another bloke called Andrew Schmidt, who's in the earth-moving game, had his grader out there for 4 or 5 days. And then on race day, there's Andrew and Steve driving the water trucks. Now, if you had to go and pay for that, you wouldn't have a race meeting.
You've accomplished a bit, though, in your own right too, Andrew. So, women's football in Broken Hill is probably bigger than most countries. Well, tell us about how strong women's football is in Broken Hill.
Well, I'll give credit to a fellow called Peter Nash came on as the chairman in 2012. They'd run a few training drills, our Masters footy team, the Shinglebacks for women. And they ran a few drills, and I remember Peter saying, look, if we're going to get fair income, we've got to have a women's competition. And we then went around to the 4 clubs trying to sell the concept of women's football, and the only club that really embraced it was Central. So the competition got up and running, and it was 6 or 8 games. Then it went to 10, 12. And what we now have, and we have had now for several years, is that our women's competition is played on the same day and the same ground as the men's A grade. Now, we're fortunate, in a lot of country areas, you have netball on Saturdays. Netball in Broken Hill is on a Tuesday night.
All right.
So we have youth girls, which is under 16s, on a Wednesday afternoon, 5, 6 o'clock, which is followed by the under 17 boys. So on a Saturday, we have our women's competition, we have our men's A grade, men's B grade, and we have under 12s and 14s. And the women play exactly the same number of games as the blokes.
I love it.
And they play their finals on exactly the same day, so they're not treated as second-class citizens, go and have a 5 or 6 week comp in February and March, or come back in November or December, or go and play on an outer oval on a Wednesday night. We're fortunate, as I said, that netball here is on Tuesday, which enables a lot of those girls to play Aussie rules. We took our girls in 2021 down to Victor Harbour, the South Australian Country Championships, and they won those championships. Now, you got to remember, we're only talking a town here of 17,500 people.
Yeah.
A number of those girls have gone on to play at SANFL level or AFLW. And it's just now, I don't know where the footy clubs would be and the Football League without the involvement of these women's teams, because a lot of the women that came in, many of them have never been involved in footy, or, a lot of them thought that they'd be the girlfriends or partners of the blokes, but it's not to be. So you're bringing all these new people in. You might have 30 or 40, and they bring their families in, they bring their friends in, they bring their partners in, and all of a sudden you've got all these new faces. It's the best thing that's happened to footy since I've been involved in Broken Hill.
That's amazing.
Full stop.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
It's something that the AFL really should be looking at, because
Even here in Mildura.
yeah.
Look, I will say that we've struck up a combined game each year against the Mildura girls, which mainly play, I think, is in the Miller League.
Yep.
And the Mildura Health Fund down there support that and do a wonderful, generous job. And so we've struck up this competition. We've been to Mildura once. The girls came here last year. We'll go back, I think it's early July, to play the girls in Mildura. It's just a wonderful thing enabling these women to play footy. And what we're seeing now is those that start in the Auskick that come through and play youth girls, the standard's only going to improve through the roof, because a lot of the girls that started playing when the football started for them, many of them had never played footy before.
Yeah, exactly.
Or come from netball or basketball. But now, you look now on, a lot of these girls going into senior women's footy have come through the entire Auskick Youth Girls program. And I go to our youth girls games, and I tell you what, some of those girls there won't be playing in Broken Hill for that much longer. They'll be off to Melbourne or Adelaide, such as the talent depth. So, look, it's a great thing, enabling people to play the sport. It's a huge boost for the competition, the league, and also for the clubs.
You've had a bit of talent come out of the men's side of footy too, haven't you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think, the obvious one at the moment is Taylor Walker.
Texican, yep.
And we have our little Football Hall of Fame. We inducted him into it just before Christmas, and he came along with his wife and 3 kids, and his mum was there, and brother and sister and all that. And he got up and he made a bit of a speech, and he said, what I want to do when I finish playing is to bring the kids back to play some junior footy in Broken Hill. And I said, well, that's great. I said, but we'd like you to come back and play a few games. And he's made the commitment, as long as some of his mates are still playing for North, he'll come back and play a few games, which he will. But, the way he's been playing, who knows when he's going to finish his AFL career. But he was inducted in. We inducted Brent Staker, Dean Solomon, who went to Essendon. Isaac Cumming, at the moment, still playing with the Giants, so he's still a way off. But a lot of players, like there's McGarry medalist in there, all Australians. We sort of thought about this a couple of years ago. Colin Casey left here in the early 70s, went off and played 250 games at Sturt, state fullback, best and fairest. He came back to Broken Hill to retire, football operations coordinator, and he said, we need a footy hall of fame, so he set it up. I can tell you now, Taylor got a huge kick out of being inducted into that when he saw the history on the wall. Yeah, and look, it was only a few weeks ago, the New South Wales AFL have announced their inaugural Hall of Fame. 3 people from here were inducted into that. Lionel Johnson, a long-standing administrator. Peter Johns is a player and administrator. And the other one was Taylor's dad, Wayne Walker.
Yeah, right.
The Walker blood runs pretty thick in Broken Hill when it comes to footy.
Mum's still there. She's a local hairdresser, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, so his mum's a hairdresser here, being Margie. His brother Ayrton lives here, works on the mine. His sister Aisha's here, working and living in Broken Hill. And his dad, Wayne, lives in Adelaide. Wayne is on the St. Pat's committee, and he runs a little area at the races called Wacky's Bar. His nickname's Wacky, and I think he had 350 in there at the races only a couple of weeks ago. So he's still got a finger in the pie. And the thing that I suppose we enjoy is when they come back, and they're still passionate about where they came from, and you can see that it's quite a humbling experience for Taylor to be inducted into our little Hall of Fame. So, and that really meant something to him. We don't mind going that extra yard, calling his little committee, as long as people appreciate it, and they do.
Yeah, tell us about St. Pat's. Pretty successful race day, and you've just had it a couple of weeks ago.
Well, it was in 1965, local Catholic priest was having a game of golf with a bloke called Johnny Toms, who was a trainer and had been a trainer, and he's a bookmaker, and he said, need to raise a few bob for the local school. So he thought, let's have a race meeting. And that's basically how it started. And the first meeting was in 1966. So next year will be the 60th race meeting. It's evolved from that, though. It's now an entire community event, whereas so many organisations who do, whether it's a soccer club or a footy club, scouts, schools, all get involved and use it as a fundraising opportunity. It's a major annual social and sporting event in Broken Hill, and it's just a huge weekend. It brings a lot of people to town. They spend money. There's a real buzz in the community. The tourism people tell you it's the start of the tourist season because basically, mid-March and things kick off from here. We've got a committee of about 25, and a lot of these people, they're all volunteers. They'll take a week off before. We were very lucky this year. The weather leading into it had been like 38, 39. We got a really good race day, and we had 15 mils of rain on the Sunday. It's a community race meeting, so it's not a TAB meeting. And we live streamed the races, which were, we spent money fixing up the sound system. The Trust did a great job. We bought the big screen up in the back of the truck. We had 1,500 people under marquees. We had 500 in Gary Radford's shed. That was a really successful day. A lot of work goes into it. And we've already started planning for next year, which will be our 60th, which we're going to get a massive crowd. We know that now.
It's just getting bigger and bigger, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, it was massive in the 70s, but you've got to go back. Broken Hill then had a population of 28,000.
Yeah, that's right.
And now it's, say, just under 18. Back in the 70s, nobody worked weekends. I remember one year it was washed out on the Saturday, and Peter Black, the mayor, declared Monday a half-day public holiday. All the shops shut, and basically, you wouldn't be able to do it today. You've got to put on now what people want, and like conditions we had, like I'll give you an example, back in the 70s and 80s, down the far end of the racecourse, the men's toilet was a Hessian screen with a trench behind it where the blokes went behind that elite. Right? Now, they've got, individual showers, got toilets, because they use it for camping when we're not using it as a race course. And you've got to keep improving facilities. People want shade, they want a cold drink, they want to be able to get a bed on. There's no connectivity out there whatsoever, so council pay 30 grand for a mobile phone tower so people can use their phones. It's just evolved now into more of a picnic-style atmosphere, and we're just going to keep working on that.
Oh,
the big difference, and I remember Dad told me, Dad's passed away now, but he told me in the 70s and 80s, if you went to the races, you got Southwark or West End.
Yes.
There's a bottle of whiskey and there's a bottle of Bacardi for the girls. Our last race meeting, I think we had about 42 different types of alcohol on course.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either.
Crazy.
Because that's what everyone wants now, isn't it?
It is. And back in those days, you would never in a million years sold a bottle of wine at a Broken Hill race meeting. What were you thinking? But now, there's pallets of the stuff. Anyway, look, it's just a huge event. So much goes into it. And it's not only the Trots have their big race meeting on the Friday night. The Greyhounds have their big race meeting Saturday night. There's recovery days at various pubs. At Silverton's a recovery day on Sunday. And it's really a 3 or 4 day experience. And we're trying to put some plans in place next year to bring a few other things in as well, so people stay for 5 or 6 nights. But a lot of work goes in it. You've got to raise sponsorship money for your races, corporate sponsorship, in-kind sponsorship. It's 12 months of the year, it just doesn't stop. Probably the thing that's really taken off in the last 18 months is this bloke Greg Donovan ran that music festival, the Big Red, out at just outside Birdsville. Yeah. So he thought, well, you know what, we could do something similar just outside of Silverton on a clay pad. Now, so just think about this. If I said to you, you've got to set up an event, there's no sewerage, no power, no running water, no electricity, no connectivity. And at that event in August this year, he's already sold 14,000 tickets.
Far out.
14,000 tickets. And that is a 3-night concert.
Monday
in August. And I think it's the 4th one that will be. And look, the amount of money that brings into the entire region is massive. But the good thing about it is that Greg Donovan, he's got his own company set up in Sydney and they run it full time. So local people here ride on the coattails, so to speak, particularly if you're in hospitality or business. But that's a massive event and he does it so well.
While we're on the subject of music, we hear you're a bit of a music lover. Tell us about your love for music, Andrew.
Got to be a bit careful because the ABC put out a playlist of music they want you to play, and it goes to every ABC station. And sometimes I sit there in the morning and go, I don't go much on that. And they'll let you play your own music if there's a reason behind it. So, argument's sake, Springsteen was touring Australia. And you want to slip in a Springsteen song, we're fine with that. So I tend to spend half my day sitting here thinking, how can I get some T-Rex on, a little bit of Bad Company, a touch of The Who, Led Zeppelin would be all right on breakfast. I think I'd get away with that. And I'm always trying to work out a way how I can, feed all that in. But I think, as a teenager growing up, when we were at boarding school in Adelaide, there were 3 dormitories of about 60 kids in each dormitory. It was bed, cupboard, and they had an old record player at the end. And we used to play music every night. I never had heard much of the Beatles when I was 12, 13, 14, but, some lad come from Strathalbyn and put on his Beatle records, and you heard that, the Stones. But then we went through that era, AC/DC started, and Led Zeppelin was going strong, and a bit of Status Quo, Bad Company, right through the 70s. So I loved all that sort of music. So when I'm here in the morning, I try and work out a way how I can slip 1 or 2 in. Sitting here in the afternoon, I'll just slip the headsets on, YouTube, bring it up, and then I'll just do the boring stuff while I'm listening to whatever I want to listen to. So best of both worlds. And look, one of the other great things, they haven't touched on is that being part of the footy league are the footy trips. We've got a little crew of ours here that there's an under 1 game being played in Karratha. They're on board. And people on the board like Dana and Jan, who have been part of the footy scene for many, many years, I could write a book on some of our footy trips. We took the blokes once to Roxby Downs, which is about 9 hours from here. And one of the blokes we took, so we drove up on the Friday, game was on the Saturday. We had a bus for all the players and that, but I took the car. I took my car because one of the lads we took said, I'll happily play in that game, but I have to be back in Broken Hill by 1 o'clock on Sunday to play in the soccer final. And I worked it out now. Maths was never a strong point, but you work it out. The game's at 1 o'clock. He's got to be back by 12. Subtract 9 from that, and you come up with 3. I got home at midnight. Those 2 did not get home at that time. So at 2:45, the alarm goes off. So I've packed the car. I've basically dragged them into the car, and we drove out of Roxby about 3:15 in the morning. A couple of hours down the road, there's a place called Spud's Roadhouse. Pulled in there, they're all asleep. I've got the biggest black coffee you've ever seen in your life. So then we keep going, Port Augusta, Orroroo, Horrocks Pass, all those places. And I'm driving down the main street of Peterborough. I don't know what time it was. It might have been, say, 8 o'clock in the morning or something. And my phone rings. So I'm on the phone. The other 3 had just woken up, by the way. So I'm talking to this mate in Adelaide. And I heard him say on the phone, you got to be careful of cops. And I said, mate, you're not going to see a cop at 8:15 in the morning in Peterborough. Well, with that, the cop car was driving down the main street straight at me. And I went, oh, shit. Well, you never saw it. Never saw it. That was 3 thought it was the funniest thing I've ever heard. I mean, they shot a video of it, which I think goes viral. But, we've had some great trips, Adelaide a lot, the Barossa, Riverland, Port Pirie, Whyalla, went to Windy Whyalla for and we're going back to Victor Harbour this year. But not that we are involved in footy for the footy trips, but I tell you what, they're a lot of fun. The girls probably enjoy the trips more than the boys these days, and we took the girls. I'm trying to work it out. Last year we went to the Barossa, and again, Steve Radford, we're about to drive out of Broken Hill, and he rang us up, and we had to meet him for a coffee before we left Broken Hill, and he shoved a handful of notes at us and said, shout the girls out to a winery when you get down there.
Yeah.
So the girls played 2 games on the Saturday, and you had to win both games to play in the final on the Sunday. So they played both games, and it rained. Now girls, mate, they don't know what rain is. So they lost both games. So at 4 o'clock, I thought, bugger it, we'll take them to the winery. So we get to the winery, and they say, can we pin the ears back? And I said, we may as well. You haven't made the final. You're playing off tomorrow for 4th and 5th or whatever. Well, let me tell you, they more than pinned their ears back. I think they pinned the bus back, and all paid for by Mr. Radford, and those girls had a hell of a trip.
All right, Andrew, Nick's got the big question now for you. You ready?
Yeah, Schmitty,
Yeah.
you know what the name of the show is. It
Yeah.
is I Should Have Stayed in Bed. You must have a I Should Have Stayed in Bed moment.
Well, I told you that story earlier about the
that's
nail.
a big one.
Yeah, that was a big one. There's probably been a few occasions. I remember once had a monstrous night, and I'm talking like a 3 o'clocker, and the next morning I had to drive a friend of mine. She was a journalist, and she just landed a job with one of the TV networks in Orange. And and she was out partying with us till 3 in the morning. And we got up at 6 to drive to Orange. So, number one, we shouldn't have done it. We would have blown the bag out of the water. So, 2 hours to Wilcannia, another 2 hours to Cobar, then you go to Ningen, Dubbo. So you're talking nearly 9-hour road trip. So I've taken off And I reckon I've got halfway to Canyon. She's asleep. Then, you have that that millisecond doze when you're driving.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had one of those. And next thing, we're off the road, went through the scrub. I woke up correctly, got back on the road. I then pulled over under a tree. She was awake by then. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "We're going to sleep for 2 hours."
Andrew, you're an absolute legend of Broken Hill, and it's been so great to chat. We could chat all bloody day, actually. What you've done for Broken Hill, and you talk about some of the other people around you that have done some amazing things, but you really are a great ambassador for Broken Hill, and your passion for Broken Hill shines through.
Bottom line, boys, just get out and enjoy life. There's an end date.
You're a bloody ripper. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, boys.
Take it easy.
Thanks, Schmitty.
Thank you for listening to the I Should Have Stayed in Bed podcast. Please subscribe, follow, give a 5-star review, and be kind to each other. Love, Nick and Ray.